I love the word manifest. I'm a word guy. I speak 6 languages. So manifest comes from Latin, and it means so mani mano means with your hand, and and the fest part comes from facere in Latin, which means to do. So oftentimes we think of manifestation as this sort of spiritual, I'm putting it out to the universe. But the truth is, manifestation means doing it with your hands, right? So manifestation means you taking the actions, and that's super important.
Let's impact some today. I think we're going to do a great job.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we connect men in pursuit of their potential. I'm encouraging you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that you first like, share, and subscribe to the podcast if you're serious about your growth. And for the fellas that are listening, I encourage you to check out the Noble Knights Men's Group. We're a group of men that will share the support, accountability, and the mentorship you need to achieve your goals by focusing on 4 key pillars: our time management and productivity, our health and fitness, of course, our leadership and relationships, and our growth and financial improvements. Now, join us and become a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve themselves and elevate their capacity for life. And I'm excited because today we're getting some wind in our sails by my guest today. He is the co-founder of Be Act Change, I believe coming out of Florida, right? You're in Florida?
I'm in Florida, but I'm from Los Angeles.
From Los Angeles. I saw that. You're from Los Angeles, living in Florida. It is a pleasure to have Dr. Paul Rivera on the podcast. Dr. Rivera, thank you for joining us.
It's a huge, huge honor for me to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you do. I love anything that helps men be better men, that works on that positivity. So I'm here for all of it. It's really my honor.
Absolutely. And it's an honor to host you and have you. I'm excited to have our conversation, share the work that you're doing with not just our audience, but the world. But first, let's get to know Dr. Paul Rivera. I'm going to move away from the mic. I'm going to let you take it, speak to the people, introduce yourself, a little bit about your story, and we could jump into our conversation a little bit more.
Sounds good. So I'm Paul Rivera. I'm a first generation everything, pretty much. First generation American. Mom is Mexican. Dad's from El Salvador. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. First generation college student. First generation in my family to not do blue collar work. All of that. So there's a lot that comes with that. Um, a lot of navigating, a lot of pioneering, really, from my own perspective of being the first, of being having to go out of my comfort zone without any roadmap, in multiple aspects of my life, from having been a lifeguard early on in my teens, to going to college, to applying to graduate school, to becoming a professor. I was in academia for a good 15 years. My PhD is in economics, so I was an economist, professor, and learning how to navigate the tenure system and all of that. And then moving on into international diplomacy. I was a U.S. diplomat for many years, learning how to navigate that, creating connections between countries, between communities, between people. Um, and now to the point of basically running my own business, my own consultancy. The common thread that has gone through all of my work, all my life, has always been about wanting to have a real, meaningful, positive impact on people. And I've learned through myself and through a whole voyage of self-discovery, really, that my greatest strength in that is being sort of my superpower, right? My superpower is to see in people the greatness in them that oftentimes they don't even see themselves, and showing them the path to living in alignment with it. And it's
Mm.
tremendous, that ability to, I'm so thankful for it, because in some ways in my life, it's been a burden sometimes, because I feel like I carry the weight of people sometimes. And that is, that's tough too. But to as I've grown and as I've really come to accept that that's who I am and that's what I bring to the table, I'm so thankful for it, right? To be able to see the goodness and the possibilities and the potential in everyone, and how much we can create when we all come together and recognize that within ourselves and within each other, and what we can achieve together. So really my whole message is really one of and this is throughout academia, diplomacy, in my consulting work that I do now, and everything, and in the nonprofit that we've created as part of our business. Everything is about creating that collective power through individual superpowers. So in a
Man,
nutshell, that's me. That's who I am. That's what I do.
I love that, Paul. And do you mind if I call you Paul, Dr.
Please
Rivera?
do. Oh, geez, please do. Yeah, yeah.
um,
And actually, it's worth mentioning. There was a time in my life, when I was in academia, where it was really important for me to be called Dr. Rivera. You know what I mean? Because
mhm,
it was me. That's who I was. And at the same time, as a brown man, the percentage of Latino PhDs in academia is about 1%. And it
wow,
was really important for that recognition to be there. And but the truth is that as time has gone on, my identity and my sense of self has frankly gone beyond that. So that
yeah,
insistence on this is who I am, and call me doctor, has faded out so much, so noticeably in me, because I realize that I am actually much more than my education and much more than my title. So it's
yeah.
it's a it's a meaningful thing for me to have been able to let go of that.
Oh man, that's amazing. I love and I actually acknowledge and respect the doctor title. I'm gonna call you Paul because I feel like we're already friends. The energy, the vibe,
Exactly.
it just it comes through here on the podcast. When was it you recognized your superpower? I'm curious to when it became evident what your superpower was, because I would imagine with your superpower being seeing in others what they don't see in themselves, there's often a disconnect. Some might have that feeling of depression, that feeling of anxiety, or that feeling of unease. And sometimes it could mean that we're just not living the lives that we're meant to live. And
Yeah,
because we feel that disconnect, it manifests in some of these other mental health issues. So I'm curious as to how you found your superpower, when that became evident, and what you did to go in the phone booth, if you would, take
for
the
sure.
button down off and reveal the S.
It's actually a really relevant and interesting question. The fact that I could tell you the story like that in a relatively concise way is frankly the product of a tremendous amount of introspection. I was so to answer your question very directly, it hasn't been that long in my life since I've been able to use that word superpower and ascribe it to myself. What is true is the following. As I said, I've always been someone who sought to do good, sought to help others. That was always very explicit in me. But like you say, that also created a burden on me. I carried people's expectations with me. There was a lot of people pleasing that goes with that. Once when you're the person who kind of feels or absorbs the vibration from other people, that's also a burden on you, right? You're hanging on to that, and it creates a certain anxiety. It creates a certain people pleasing within you, wanting to serve those, oftentimes at the expense of yourself.
Mhm,
So I would say that as part of the work that I've done, so I've worked all over the world. My field is in international development and humanitarian assistance, and that's what I did as a diplomat. Um, And one of the things that we saw really was that so much of that work was very colonial in a lot of ways, that it was, when you see a developing country, you see a community that needs help in some way. And the temptation is to say, well, obviously they're not doing it well on their own. So I have the solution. I have the PhD. I am an expert. And so I'm going to tell you what the solution is. When the fact of the matter is that those people, those communities have a tremendous amount of local knowledge. They actually know what the challenges are. They have a very good sense of what the solutions might be. And they just oftentimes don't have the resources to implement them, don't have the structures to have the productive conversations to carry them out. Right. So
mhm,
as we started really revolutionizing how it is that we go about doing that work internationally, what we saw was that the key is recognizing that each person, each organization, each community has a superpower, that they have a way in which they visualize problems, solve problems. Each of us has a reason why, you and I guarantee you, when your telephone rings and you have a buddy on the other end that says, Ted, I need your help, you more than likely know what it is that they need your help with, because that's your superpower. That's what people call you up for. That's what people seek you out for. I realized that for me, when my phone would ring, when my text would go off and somebody would say, hey, Paul, I need some help, it's because they're stuck in their life. There's a major decision that they need to make. They're at a transition point in their life, and they know that they can call me because, one, I'm the one who's going to be there for them, who's going to not only cheer them on, but actually make them see how what seems like a crazy dream is actually brilliance. It's them seeking to live their reality, their authenticity, their own superpower, and that's when we think about being the best people we can be, the best man, the best father, the best husband that I can be, that best version of myself is the one that is authentic. It's the one that is me living my superpower and bringing that to the world as much as possible. So how did I get to that point? Honestly, it's very direct asking. So, like, as I mentioned, if you when what happens when your buddies call you, when somebody calls you up, it's thinking about, what are you sought out for? It's thinking about, how is it that you solve problems? And there we ask a real basic question to folks, and one of them is, if you basically, the United Nations calls you up, they say, we found $40 billion for you to solve any problem worldwide. What problem would you solve? And it's really fascinating, because everybody has a different answer. Everybody has a different answer. And then the question is, okay, they're going to write you the check, but they need to know the 3 to 5 steps that you would take in order to implement the solution, right? So a lot of people say
Oh,
things like world peace, or they say things like clean water, education, whatever it is, right? Okay, but how do you solve it, right? And the education one is really fascinating because, as an example, some people say, okay, I need to fund the system. I need to hire teachers. I need to revamp the curriculum to decolonize it, and whatever it is that they think. Other people say, for example, I need to go into these underserved neighborhoods, and I need to talk not just to the students, but to the parents and the grandparents, have them understand that education is important, right? And then have them understand how that changes lives. So everybody sees it different. It could be the same issue, but some people see it from a macro, systemic kind of a thing. Other people see it from a very personal, grassroots kind of thing, right? And each one has an element of what is your how to, what is your superpower, how do you see problems, and how do you attack them, right? So it's
yeah.
it's a whole series of questioning of yourself that you slowly start to understand. You know what? That's my superpower. When people come to me, that's what they come to me for. When there's a problem, this is how I approach the problem, right? And once you
Mhm.
start talking about yourself that way, it is transformative. It is stunning. Once you start to be able to talk to people and say, this is who I am, this is what I bring. So all of a sudden, you transcend titles. It doesn't matter if you are secretary, manager, vice president, you're the person who brings this kind of solution. This is the approach that I bring, which immediately makes it so that you are now beyond, for example, in the workplace, this concept of toxic competition. I'm not competing with you anymore. I have my how to, you have your how to. Actually, the best thing we can do is come together and solve these problems together. So you escape that toxicity that's within the workplace. You escape the the questioning of your own value. It's
Mhm.
something that you carry with you all the time. You embody it, and it's something so potent. And I love doing it. Really, really, honestly, I love doing this work with my black and brown folks, because it's not
Yeah.
something that we're taught. It's not a way of speaking about ourselves that we are taught. That I know, I come from immigrant family, immigrant parents, and I was taught to keep my head down, work hard, and they will recognize my efforts. And the truth is that I've had to advocate for myself all the time, because oftentimes the system doesn't recognize my efforts. And so, having this way of speaking about myself and having this tool of how it is that I have others understand who I am and what I bring is something that has shot me up, you know? So
Yeah.
it's a really powerful thing.
It's amazing because it also becomes something no one can take away from you.
That's right.
Um, and being blunt and honest, predominant members of the Noble Knights and listeners of the podcast, Black and Brown, maybe because they resonate and relate to who I am and some of the guests that I have on. Uh, but you're right. We don't get taught to think of ourselves or talk about ourselves in this form. I'm the son of two immigrant parents, and the narrative that was projected upon me is you need to put your head down and work, mind your own business, work twice as hard as the people around you, don't cause
Yeah.
too much noise, right? And I paid attention to that, and it worked well for me. But in adulthood, I was still in survival mode,
Right.
and there was a time where it didn't serve me any longer. And to your point about that superpower, right? It was something as simple as me looking back and recognizing my superpower, other than connecting men in pursuit of their potential, was time management. Because I can't tell you how many people, whether it's my wife, my in laws, my parents, or anybody's like, Ted, I don't know how you do it. You got this going on. You're in the gym, you're in the podcast, you're on TV, you're this. I don't know how you do it. So I was like, oh, right? Let me build a course. Let me show you how I do it. Here are my tools of time. This is how I
Yeah.
manage time. Objectives. We talked about vision boards before hopping on this recording. I'm looking at mine right now, and definitely we'll talk up on that a little bit later on. But to your point, we need to learn how to articulate our superpowers and the gifts that we provide to the world, because that helps us tap into the unique gifts that we have to share. And when properly tapped into, we can then monetize said gifts and then find and build a lifestyle that we enjoy. We don't have to make it our day job. We don't have to make it our main gig, but we could at least find that sense of purpose, which helps us stay resilient through the tough times. So, with your diverse background, everything you've gone through, um, traveling the world, uh, professor, to co-founding Be Act Change. How has your diverse background influenced to take this path and focus on mental health, cultivating this American dream,
Yeah.
um, for Black and Brown and all types of people? If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Payton here, host of the Modern Man podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals. Check out themodernmanpodcast.com.
All right. So there's a couple of questions there. One of them is, how has my diverse background helped me throughout my career? And I would say that it's been absolutely essential to my success. So like working I will tell you, one of my best one of my best days professionally, maybe 6 years ago, it was just before COVID. I was working in Paraguay. I was working in Paraguay, and I was working on an international development project. We woke up real early in the morning. We left Asuncion, which is the capital. We drove out of the capital and we went to visit a dairy collective. Really beautiful land, humble and amazing people. I got to see their cows and their system and all of that. We went from there to where the community collected the milk. And so there was all that, and we happened to be there on payday and we saw them getting paid. And we went from there to the processing plant where it gets pasteurized and turned into yogurt and whatever else. And then we went to the exporter type location where things get distributed. And then that evening, my last interview was with the Paraguayan Supreme Court. So in one day, I went from talking to dairy farmers, stepping in cow poop and all of that, to speaking to the Supreme Court, right? The fact that I was able to do that is because of my diversity. I come from, my family, the people that I grew up with, the people that I was around, gave me so much ability to talk to the folks who work with their hands and who work the land and who see that pride and take see that value and take pride in what they do. And that's one piece. And then I have the luxury of having had this educational journey that allows me to speak to people at the highest levels of government as well, right? So my diversity, my background, that's part of my superpower, right? That's part of what allows me to be effective in a massive range of situations that if I had if I had led a different life, if I'd come from a different background, I wouldn't be able to do. So I'm always super, super thankful for that. Um, what was the other part of your question? I had a different I
Yeah,
was gonna go
no
somewhere
worries. I
else.
was I was enthralled in your answer, and I knew we both would have lost it. The second half was how that diverse background led
Yeah.
into the founding of your company being Be Act Change. But just
Yeah.
to reflect on what you mentioned about that
Yeah.
diversity, the note I wrote down because I take notes during the podcast, so
Yeah.
eloquently spoken as what you shared, being able to have that range. My favorite poem is If by Rudyard Kipling. And I believe the words are if you could speak with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, right? That's what you just perfectly described was the
Yeah.
ability to have the virtuous side, but also still the foundational side and the groundedness of
Grounded and
yourself.
rooted. Absolutely.
Exactly. Being able to reach for the stars while keeping your feet on the ground. So
When
how
I
has
was
that played into that?
when I was a graduate student working on my PhD, I had the honor of being the research assistant for his name is Dr. Richard Easterlin. Amazingly, he's still alive. He's very close to 100 years old by this point, at the University of Southern California. And he is one of the preeminent researchers in what's called life cycle happiness. So, studying how it
Mhm.
is that from your youth all the way through retirement, how your measures of happiness change depending on, you know, racial things and income and education and all of these things. The most fascinating result from all of that research that I got the chance to do with him, and what's stuck with me for decades now, has been that the happiest people are those who, one, have succeeded in a way that is meaningful to them, and two, who take active steps to always remember where they started.
Mm.
And that is huge because the people who are the least happy are the ones who, by any objective measure, have created success, but always reference their comparison to what they consider their concurrent peers. So if you're constantly measuring your happiness and your success against those who are left and right of you, you're never going to be happy because you're always going to be at that comparison. When you are true, the people who are truly happiest are the people who did something that was meaningful to them and can go, man, you remember where I started. I'm so thankful for those hard days, and the struggle that I had to make it through. And that's the version of themselves they're comparing themselves to. That's where the happiness comes in. That's where the real lasting joy comes in. So keeping
Hmm.
that rootedness, that groundedness to who you are and where you came from is massively important. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
part is huge.
I
And as far as
translate that as um, gratitude is what that makes me think of. And
yeah,
I always get teary eyed and emotional when I think of the gratitude because
yeah,
when I tap into my gratitude, I say, if you're a seed that's been planted, you know what the darkness is like and the scariness of the water before you break ground, right? Before you sprout and before the first
yeah,
fruit comes. But the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. So you have to endure that darkness to get to the other side, right? And
that's
but when
right.
you look back at when you were the seedling, you know, it's an emotional journey because you remember how far you've come.
That's right.
And for anybody listening, I hope that they can tap into that. Wherever they are now is farther than where they were, and where
Yeah,
they stand to go. Um, you'll get there eventually if you diligently just take the steps today, tomorrow, and the day afterwards. But it didn't mean to
that's right.
interrupt. Sorry, I didn't
No,
mean to
no, no. And I
transition
mean,
over.
and I think that just to sort of pick up on that point, so much of that is also, I think, especially for men, especially for Black and brown men, is realizing that you don't have to do it alone. And that's such a big piece
Yes.
of what we fight with a lot, you know. We've done a good amount of work in terms of mental health and men's mental health in me primarily in the Latino community. But when you look at things of like suicide rates and suicidal ideation among these younger Latinos, it's terrifying. And at some point you mentioned a little while ago the American dream, and so we actually have put out a book, and our book is called "Creating Your Limitless Life." And then it says, crossed out, it says "Living the American Dream," but the American dream crossed out. And one of the things that we talk about in our book is that the American dream is so fascinating because in its concept, the American dream is that in a land of equal opportunity, your own effort and your own will is what drives you to be the highest version of yourself. That's the definition of it. Okay.
Mm,
So there's so many things there, right? One is that as much as we would like to believe it, it's not a land of equal opportunity, right? There are barriers, and those barriers are real. And we forget also that the definition of the American dream is about your highest self, what's relevant to you. And the truth is that what's happened is that the American dream has been translated into a set of metrics. Do you have the car? Do you have the income? Do you have the house? And if you don't have these things, then you must not be making it, right? So one of the things that we see, especially with young Latino males, is that the stress that they have upon themselves, the burdens that they carry, the anxiety that builds in them is because they feel in essence that they are not making it in terms of those metrics of the American dream. And we
mm,
see it not, and I mean, and it's profound, right? Because not only do they feel bad about it, not only do they feel the stress, but those young Latino men have a higher level of suicidal ideation that comes along with those feelings. So not only do they feel bad about it, they're not sure that they can continue living because they're not making it. And that is
mhm.
awful. It's tragic, right? And so
Yeah.
so much of the motivation for us in terms of be act change. So it's be yourself, act in accordance with who you are, and change the world. Right. So that's where be
Mm,
act change comes from. So much of the work that we do is really about having people understand what their gift is, what their purpose is, aligning their actions to it, really importantly, creating the resilience tools so that when life throws you a curveball, you don't fall down, but you find ways to keep marching forward. Um, and and really creating a new American dream, a new dream, right? One that is yours, one that's not based just on metrics, but based on things that are meaningful to you. And we were my wife. So this company, BX Changes, it's my wife and I, Esther Zeladon, and we do this together, which has always been my dream, was to have a partner that I could work with as well. So that's amazing. Um,
nice.
but we really, we at one point, we're at the point where we had achieved what anybody would say was the American dream. We were both Latinos with PhDs, and we were US diplomats, and the job paid for our housing and the school for the kids and the whole thing. And it was incredible. And we realized that we felt so misaligned. We felt empty. We felt like this wasn't where we
Mm,
needed to be. This wasn't the kind of impact that we wanted to have. And
why?
so, why?
Yeah.
One, because as a diplomat, you are by definition representing a an ideology that isn't yours to choose, right? You are
Mhm,
just a uh, speaker. You're just a voice for a set of policies. That's one piece. The second piece is that there is no separation between your personal and your professional life. So
mhm.
this might seem a little bit personal, but it kind of encapsulates the story. After my son was born several years ago, we made the decision for me to have a vasectomy. I had to report the status of my reproductive organs to the United States government in order for me to, be allowed to return to the country that we were serving in. So there's absolutely no separation between your personal and your professional. It doesn't exist.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then and then it's such a massive bureaucracy that it's very hard to effect change from inside. So the US government is still one of our largest clients in BAC change. And I've found that we are much more impactful from the outside, pushing change to the organization rather than being in the organization and trying to create change from that angle.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is that, for example, in terms of the diplomatic corps of the United States, Latinos are approximately 5%. So we encountered a tremendous amount of racism and discrimination and lots of barriers that at the end of the day, it wasn't it wasn't a situation that we wanted to be in. So,
Yeah, yeah.
we chose the exit option, and it wasn't out of a lack of loyalty, and it
Mhm.
wasn't out of a lack of love for my country. And in fact, it's because I love my country that I felt that I could be much more impactful in a different way.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate that. I only asked because I imagine sometimes there's that, and especially black and brown men, the imposter syndrome of you get a certain status and you feel uncomfortable in that, or you don't know if you've earned it. So,
yeah,
I wasn't sure if that was playing into any of that, but just for anyone listening, um, you belong where you are. Right?
that's right.
I just want to kind of speak that into someone that if they feel that imposter syndrome or they feel the disconnect, they're not sure they belong in that room. You are in that room for a reason.
That's right.
And identifying your superpower, some of the things Paul is talking about, this is how not only do you feel comfortable in that room, but this is how you stand out in the room. And my vernacular growing up was very much like it is now. And the story was amongst my black friends because I also went to private school. I was too white for the black kids and I was too black for the white kids. I spent a lot
Yeah.
of my life feeling like I don't fit in. But similar to what you mentioned with the superpower of diversity, my superpower was I was meant to stick out, but I can speak to a wide range of people because of the um, my ability to be almost a chameleon. I don't change
Yeah.
colors, but I mesh into those areas that I am in, and I'm able to communicate effectively. But you were mentioning you and your wife weren't feeling comfortable and kind of transitioning to be act change. I wanted to let you continue that story.
That was sort of that whole discomfort, and what we didn't like was sort of the final piece, but truly what we saw was that our real ability to make change was going to be doing this on our own. And that's really when we
Nice.
took the leap. We realized that we could bring so much of this power, of this idea of superpowers, of collective power, of of listening. And that's one of the things that we saw so deeply missing in at all levels, from national levels all the way down to within our own households. Sometimes the power of listening, and not just listening, but really hearing what people are saying, and having different kinds of conversations around. We talk a lot to youth, Latino youth, Black youth, and we talk about, what are you going to talk about at Thanksgiving? What are you going to talk about at Easter when everybody's sitting around the table? Are you going to talk about, oh man, you look like you've gained a couple pounds, or well, when's that baby coming, or or whatever? Or are you going to ask people, tell me about what's your highest aspiration, and how can I help you with it? And
Mm,
that is a series of conversations that we encourage people to have all the time, and it is transformative at the family level. When you sit around, and it's awkward the first time, and then once people have heard it, you can start asking that question all the time: what's your highest aspiration, and how can I help you with it? I guarantee, one of the things we talk about, I think about that day. What's the one question that dairy farmers and Supreme Court justices never get asked? And it's, what's your highest aspiration? Because we assume that the dairy farmer doesn't have one, and we assume that the Supreme Court justice is already living it, right?
yeah,
But the truth is that everyone always has an aspiration. There's always some vision that somebody has of a different future, of something more, something different they could be doing. And anything that we can do to help people align to it and live it is tremendous, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, that's amazing, Paul. And you mentioned working with those underserved communities, pouring into them this vision, this knowledge, right? This confidence, really,
Yeah.
to go out there and create their lives in a unique way, not the prescribed American dream that we're thinking about, the house, white picket fence, dog, 2.5 kids, all that. We're talking about, what do you want for your life? And being the son of two immigrants myself, a lot of friends that I know who are also the children of immigrants grew up with certain standards in the household, a certain culture of respect towards elders. And you alluded to this earlier, talking about, a lot of people pleasing, overthinking, things like that
Yeah.
growing up. And I imagine, to a lot of the youth that you speak to, these could be recurring topics or recurring things that pop up. How, I guess, how do you get past those barriers preventing Latinos and Blacks, and just men in general, from seeking mental health care, or from getting past their own blocks of overthinking and people pleasing, and
Yeah.
learning to serve themselves?
I think a big part of that is really one at a time. It's one at a time. So that's why we do this work that we do. So we go out and we speak to schools, we speak to high schools. I get in front of anybody who will have me. And as much as I question myself sometimes, that imposter syndrome doesn't go away. You learn how to manage it, but it doesn't go away.
Mhm.
I think that what I've achieved in my life, anybody who has the energy and the focus and the dedication could also do it. I don't think that I've done anything super special. And yet, when I get in front of these groups, it's clear that they've never seen anyone like me, right? They've never I've stood in front of so many groups of young men and women who have never seen a Latino with a PhD, who've never seen a Latino who's
Mm.
gone to over 100 countries. They've never seen a Latino and his wife, who together form what they would consider a power couple. So just that representation is hugely important. I think there are tons of other people who could be doing that same work, but they're not necessarily, for lots of reasons. But so I think it's really, really important for me, for Esther, my wife, and for us to keep being out there and showing a possibility that they had never thought about. And I think that's a big piece. There's the problem with the American dream, as we've talked about it, is that it's limiting. It says this is the box and this is where you have to fit in. The truth is that each of us has a different place that we could go to, way beyond the American dream. So a big piece of this is one at a time, changing lives one at a time, getting in front of people, having them see, what, there's another way to do it. There's another way. And a big piece that you mentioned, the elders, a big piece of that is thanking the elders, those who made the
Mm.
sacrifices, those who uprooted their lives and their families in search of a better place and situation for themselves and for us. They did
Yeah.
that for us. And honestly, I think that we owe it to them to create our reality in a way that makes sense for us. So a big piece of that conversation is you thank them, you acknowledge them, and then it's okay to say, but I'm going to do it my way. I have a set of
Mm.
resources, I have a set of experiences, I have skills that I've acquired that, thanks to the situation you created, I'm able to put into play for not just my benefit, but for our benefit as a family, for our benefit as a community. And those are really tough. It's really tough to take those steps, because oftentimes we will feel like we are betraying our community and betraying our elders by defying what they have placed as expectations on us. Um, and at the same time, it's sometimes it's a thing of, sometimes I'm too scared, and you have to take the leap even if you're afraid.
Yeah, yeah.
you know
Doing it scared, right? That's the definition of courage. It's not the
exactly.
absence of fear, it's action with the presence of fear,
That's
and you still
correct.
move forward. And I
Yeah.
remember the conversation with my parents where, as the, son of immigrants, they said, you're either going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or a failure. And I said, I'm going to go into TV. So I guess I'm going to be a failure. But hearing their questionings, their wait a minute, what are you going to do? And what is
Yeah.
this? But what follows is text messages from my dad who watches me from hundreds of miles away, and my mom who streams me every morning and going home and they tell me they're proud of me. It's
Yeah.
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate conversation, right? I wasn't rebellious towards my parents saying, I'm doing this. I was educating my parents. I said, hey, they know that doctors and lawyers have good livings. But I told them, I said, hey, here's the path on
Right.
how I expect to make it onto TV, right? I didn't just say I want to be in TV or I want to be a YouTube star. That wasn't me. It was, hey, mom, dad, here's the schooling, here's the education, here's the steps, here's the internship, and this is how I get there. And then they saw
Right.
that path and they saw that it could provide a lifestyle and an income. So it's doing it our own way, depicting that dream for our elders who just might not be familiar with uh, the world that has changed so fast from
Right.
technology that even when I was in school, it's a different world, right? I couldn't imagine cell phones in the cafeteria at lunchtime, but that's the reality that they have now, right? But coming towards the end of the episode, I want to share some practical advice for some of the folks listening, right?
Yeah.
So the work you and your wife do with Be Act Change, working with these communities, Latinos, Blacks, you're meeting some of them. Let's say some of our listeners fall into this category and they're wanting to manifest their own version of the American dream. What are some of the practical steps? I know we mentioned vision board earlier in pre-recording, but what are some of the practical steps you would give to these listeners to craft their own dream?
Several things. Okay, one, I love the word manifest. I'm a word guy. I speak 6 languages. So manifest comes from Latin, and it means so mani mano means with your hand, and and the fest part comes from facere in Latin, which means to do. So oftentimes we think of manifestation as this sort of spiritual, I'm putting it out to the universe. But the truth is, manifestation means doing it with your hands, right? So manifestation means you taking the actions, and that's super important. That is step one. As you have to take some action. Too often we get caught in that cycle of overthinking. I don't want to I don't want to do this because it might be wrong. And then we just get stuck in that eternal analysis paralysis. Take a step, make a change, even if it's wrong, retool and keep stepping. So that part, however small that step is, oftentimes we think of the step as like this massive life-changing thing. And the truth is that it just needs to be one small step at a
Mhm.
time. The second piece is giving yourself a little bit of grace.
Mm,
People, we're especially as men, we have so much weight to be right, to be strong, to be stoic, to be you know unmoved and unfazed in the face of adversity. And the truth is that we're human. We feel, we hurt, we cry, we celebrate, and all of those are legitimate, and you need to allow yourself that space, that grace to make a mistake if it's wrong, to acknowledge the mistake, to course correct, and to celebrate when things go right. And that's the other piece. Piece number three is 100% celebration. I am all about celebration, and I mean celebrating little steps, because that's what helps give you the resilience. I mentioned earlier that we talk about finding your purpose, aligning your actions to it, and then creating the resilience. A big piece of your resilience is acknowledging and celebrating, even in a small way, any step along the way. And I'll give you an example. My wife and I talk about it all the time. When we were working on our doctorates, when we
mm,
filed our dissertation, that's when we celebrated. And it felt super empty. You know what I mean? Like, after 5 years of massive amounts of labor and heartbreak and the whole thing, you get to the end, you turn it in, the lady at the office stamps it, and you're done. Suddenly you're Dr. Rivera and it's official, and you're like, well, what do I do now? You know what I mean? It's super anticlimactic. As opposed to when we wrote Creating Your Limitless Life, we celebrated choosing the type of paper we were going to print it on. We
Hmm.
celebrated choosing the title. We celebrated choosing the font, which is not a trivial thing if you've ever written a book. You know what I
It's
mean?
not.
And
No.
so every little step, we're like, yes, yes. Every chapter that we finished, every illustration that went into it, because everything, it's a piece of you, it's a labor of love, and you celebrate that. When that publication came out, just the joy that came with that, because you understand the resilience and everything that you had to go through to get there. So it makes it
Yeah.
makes the victory that much sweeter, but it also makes the fight to get there that much more doable, because you're acknowledging the progress all the way through. So if there were three steps, it would be that: take action. Manifest means take action. Have some grace for yourself, and then celebrate even the small things all along the way.
Beautifully said. I have a feeling a lot of our listeners are about to go on a winning streak,
Oh yeah.
celebrating every little win.
They
That's
should.
we, we we mentioned vision boards. I have a first place ribbon on my vision board, um, and it's from a Family Feud fair game, like the most minuscule win ever. Uh, but I put it there because I am not good at celebrating my wins, Paul. I am not.
Yeah.
I'm always about, okay, next mission. I'm Kobe Bryant, like mission's not over, right? I'm not good at that. So one of my mentors said, you need to celebrate your small wins. So I have
Yeah.
that ribbon on my vision board just to remind me I'm a winner. It might have been a little small state fair, family feud competition, but I have won. And if I've done it once, I could do it again and then do it again, make it a habit, go on a winning streak.
And then
Beautifully
thinking
said.
about it in different aspects of your life, you know what I mean? So I celebrate my small wins at the gym. I beat my time a little bit. I lifted a little bit more. I celebrate my small wins with my spouse and my relationship. I just actually checked some of my investments, and my investments last year did really well. So the financial aspect, celebrating all of that, every time, all you think about all the aspects in your life. Think about even your spirituality. I'm not a religious guy per se, but spirituality is very important to me, and celebrating your connection to something larger than you, and celebrating your
Yeah,
connection to what you contribute to the world. All of those things are super, super important, and you can do that on a daily basis. So I recommend keeping that celebration mindset for sure.
I love it. I love it. Keep stacking those wins. Just a few more questions here coming to the end. And I wanted to make sure we spent some time together before I asked this question. At the beginning, you
Okay.
said your superpower was seeing in others what they don't see in themselves. What do you see in me?
Oh man. I don't, so okay, so here's the thing. The fact that this is your show and this is what you do, and the way that you speak says volumes about you. Volumes, right? You've clearly acknowledged who you are. You've understood what your purpose is, and that is a huge, and you've taken steps towards living it, right? That is massive. I think that I mean, for one, look at you. You are a seriously good looking man. You are very articulate. You have a tremendous amount of range, as you've said so yourself. I think for you, really, is thinking about what scale of impact do you want to have in this life. So it's not even about, am I impacting, am I making a difference? It's how big do you want that to be, right? You're somebody who has
Hmm.
access to media channels. You're somebody who can appeal to such a tremendous amount of folks. I think that you have the potential to blow up huge on an international scale, creating this impact, because this positivity for for men, this whole message that men need to hear. It's not just in the United States. It is something that happens all over the world, and that message is one that can resonate tremendously. So for me, the potential that I see in you is to be internationally huge, if that's something that you wanted to do.
I certainly appreciate that, and I receive that, Paul. Thank you so much. I'm gonna go ahead and just like clip that last minute and a half and just put it on repeat and listen to it every
Do
morning.
it.
Um, for folks who want to get a taste of your superpower or find out theirs, tap into more of the work you and your wife are doing with Be Act Change. I would love for them to have the opportunity to connect, reach out, find the links. What are some of the best sources they can
For
turn
sure,
to?
and this is for, as you say, if you want to connect with us, if you're looking for somebody to come share that message with your community, with your organization, whatever else, best way to start is through our website, beactchange.com. I'm much more active on LinkedIn, so you can look up Dr. Paul Rivera on LinkedIn, and then we have an Instagram page, which is b.act.change on Instagram. So we're all about building community. We come across a lot of folks who feel like they don't have champions in their lives, and so we always tell people that if you're lacking champions, come to us because we're happy to be your champions.
Absolutely. I'll have those links in the show notes below for anybody watching on YouTube. They could just open up the description, or if you're listening through your favorite podcast app, just go ahead and revert to the show notes so you can connect directly to Paul and Be Act Change through those links. Paul, last question. It's usually the heaviest one, which is why I save it for last. And if it's something we've spoken about already, feel free to expand more on that. But what is something you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Oh man. Okay. That is a heavy question. So it's something from my childhood. Actually, I'm going to give you there's two quick ones. I'm going to make them quick. One is when I was about 5 years old. I have an aunt who's 10 years older than me, and she was practicing for her quinceañera, right? Her big, coming out type party that Latinas have. And I was her dance partner. I was 5 years old. I was her dance partner. And we would be at my grandparents' house. We put the music and we would dance together until one day, this friend of my grandfather's, who I don't even remember who he is now, but he came in, and I was there, and my aunt was there, and my parents were there, and my grandparents were there, and he walks up to me, and he kind of whispers, but loud enough for everyone to hear. He said it in Spanish. He said basically, "You look like such a pretty girl dancing." Um,
Mm,
and so he said it in Spanish, implying that I was being extremely girly by dancing with my aunt, and growing up in a very macho Latin culture, there was nothing worse than appearing girly, appearing feminine, and to have had that said in front of my dad and in front of my grandfather, to have been 5 years old and understood the importance of what that guy said, and to have had nobody around me come to my defense
mm,
is something that shaped me tremendously. So for example, from that day, I never danced again. I never danced until I was about 40 years old and I met Esther. And she happens to be a competitive salsa dancer. So, she really sort of helped me break out of that. Oh, I'm terrible. I can do it, but it's not pretty, man. It's not pretty.
quick, quick,
Um,
slow.
and, but just that, even from that age, I wanted to be the man who never put that expectation on another man, on another boy. I wanted to be so much more open and so much more accepting, and really create an understanding where masculinity was, I'm strong enough to show you my weakness. I'm strong enough to show you who I really am, and have that not matter. Sorry, I get a little teary eyed when I tell that story because it's a really impactful story, um, in my life, and having had few mentors who spoke that way in my life. My childhood hero, and I think that a lot of your listeners probably aren't old enough to know who he is, but my childhood hero was, Jacques Cousteau, who was he's a French diver, and he's the pioneer of modern scuba, and he had this show on that I loved to watch as a kid. It was on like once a week. It was called The Underwater World of Jacques Cousteau, and he would go out on his boat and he would travel the world and he would do all this amazing stuff. But if you saw him, he was a small guy, very thin framed and, not what you would look at as, this big strapping macho guy. And yet
Hmm.
he was so confident. And, there was life threatening things that happened all the time. And he just faced them systematically, methodically. And he was comfortable with who he was. And I would see how he would interact with people, even though if he didn't speak the language or whatever else. And he was so kind and so warm and so welcoming. And he was a vision of masculinity that I had never had before. I understood that
Mm.
a man, that there were lots of different ways to be a real man. So that's sort of the image that I carried with myself all the time. I realized that that's why I learned French. That's why I learned to scuba. That's why I wore a red beanie for years. Because he was my childhood hero, and that's what I wanted to be, and that's what I wanted to portray. So
That's fantastic.
yeah,
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that means a lot, and and I know it relates and translates to a lot of our listeners because
yeah,
there are times growing up where we we stunt ourselves because of something that happened in childhood. We make agreements with ourselves in our youth that continue in adulthood, and we think to ourselves, "Why don't I dance when I hear the music? I
right.
love to dance."
I love,
But
yeah,
and it's not about dancing great or looking fantastic. It's about the freedom of expression
yeah.
that we're able to have in the moment. So, um, Paul, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for everything you shared with us, your wisdom, your time through this episode. It's been a true honor getting to meet you and getting to connect with you here.
No, it's been my honor, my pleasure. As I said, I love what you do. I love to be on this show, and I'm glad to have been able to share a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to recap with some of the gems that you left along the way because a lot of our listeners are either driving, cleaning, or doing some chores around the house while listening, which I appreciate you guys multitasking as best as you can and getting this value while we continue to chat. But seeing people what they don't see in themselves, I imagine a lot of folks are probably not living their ultimate highest expectations of themselves, or as you mentioned, asking somebody, what are your highest aspirations and how can I get help you get there? Are you asking yourself that? Right? And each of us has a superpower. You might not have identified it yet, but finding out what people ask you for help with. What is the problem you're always solving for others? What are people calling you for help for? Because that is a hint towards your superpower. Having that reflection, having the intention, asking others what it is that you provide helps you find your value, your purpose, and helps you continue to what Paul said, transcend titles because you truly know the purpose and the value that you bring and the problem that you solve. Speak with crowds and keep your virtue, walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. Do you have the diversity within yourself? And as I've said many times on this podcast, the world is unfair, but there's an unfair advantage in your favor. And it's finding how your unique gift, though it could cause heartache in one arena, could also be your advantage in another, and finding how that works in your favor. The stress of the American dream. Don't chase that prescribed picture that you never asked for anyway. Find what it is that you want for yourself. Tap into what that superpower is, how that manifests in your life, and then take the actions to create that and manifest that. As I skip down in my notes, manifest to do with your hands, taking action, giving yourself grace along the way, and then celebrating the wins. I want each and every single one of you listening to be on a winning streak from today until next week when you tune back into another episode of The Modern Man, because you know I'm going to ask that you hit that subscribe button, hit that share button to give it to someone else who you know can get value from it as well. And please leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. Let me know what your favorite episode is. I know it's probably this one because you love Paul so much, but let us know how we can do better because that's the best way we can serve you. And it helps the algorithm so we can keep giving you this content and this value. And it's the best compliment that you can give us here on the podcast. With that being said, guys, thank you for making it to the end. And as we always say, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's go.